We are in Champions League, man.
That was my next
Dilly din, dilly dong, come on.
Encara Messi, 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 gol, 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 gol.
Into Sheringham, and Solskjaer has won it!
I will love it if we beat them. Love it.
This is the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast with Gary Curneen.
Hello, welcome to the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. My name is Gary Curneen. Joining us for this episode are David and Keith Mayer, so co-authors of the brand new book, Goal Dust, How to Become a More Effective Coach Quickly. I've read the book, loved it, wanted to get them on, so as always, I won't ruin the book for you. I urge you to get it, but before you do, have a listen and let me know what you think. At Gary Curneen on Instagram, at Gary Curneen on Twitter. We are very excited to have a new sponsor on the podcast, Bounce Athletics. If you are a coach running a summer camp, Bounce Athletics offers fully customized micro-stitch premium camp balls for under $9 a ball. To receive free shipping with delivery in May, order by February 15th. Same camp balls that are used by a lot of D1 programs, Wake Forest, Creighton, Texas Tech, Michigan State, Florida State, to name just a few. Bounce Athletics also offers NFHS and FIFA approved custom textured training balls for under $25 a ball and can turn orders around in as little as 4 weeks with DHL Direct Shipping Air, so you're ready for the spring season. Modern Soccer Coach listeners can get $50 discount on their first order of custom balls or training vests by mentioning the podcast when they email info@bounceathletics to begin the order process. So please go ahead, check out Bounce Athletics. I met them at convention, looked at their product, absolutely brilliant, and great deals on it as well. Excited to be teaming up with them. One more little announcement, the Modern Soccer Coach Community Platform webinar for January is on player development, and it is out now. It's up on the platform, so 3 presentations, one from myself on creating reflection and review processes with players on your team. We've got Oliver Gage talking about the role of analysis and data in improving attacking players. And then Jonas Munkvold on improving individuals in a team training session. So we've had Jonas and Ollie on the podcast, absolutely brilliant. Their presentations are first class. So please go ahead, check that out. It's out now on the Modern Soccer Coach platform, and you can get access to over 300 video exercises and all the webinars we've done up until this point for free. 14-day free trial and then only $6 a month. modernsoccercoach.com/community. Okay, over to David and Keith. Enjoy. David, Keith, thanks so much for joining me today on the Modern Soccer Coach podcast. Excited to have you both on.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're excited about it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Really enjoyed the book, and obviously what I try to do in these podcasts when we bring people on from books is not to ruin it for them. The first question I wanted to ask you was, the bottom of the book said how to become a more effective coach quickly, but as I got through the book I realised that there was a real long-term focus in all of these goals and objectives. What's more difficult, the short term of awareness or the long term of committing to these processes?
For me, Gary, I think first and foremost, the most important thing is the here and now, and to change or adapt to what you're actually doing, you actually have to be aware that there may be a better way or a different way that you can approach things. And I think that initial bit of being open and being receptive to learning, just the possibility of improvement and growth increases massively then. And once you've got that initial and you're in a place where you're open and receptive to learn, you can make those initial strides. But I would liken it a little bit to January 1st, and you get out of bed and you go to the gym on the first day of the year, and for the first few days you're in a great place and you can go, but the key is at that point you've got to be consistent. You've got to stay true to what your aims and objectives are and what it is you're trying to achieve. So you'll have strong principles around what it is you do, but flexibility to learn and being consistent to what it is and where it is you want to go.
Keith, in your times and working in academies, you must have seen hundreds of coaches with different lifespans of coaching careers. Is that what sets them apart? The ability to connect and to commit to it long term? And
Yeah, I guess it all depends on where you started from, Gary, initially. I think the X's and O's, which is the practice designs, are massively important, of course. But in actual fact, it's a matter of once you start to get a good grounding and a good understanding and a greater awareness of what's actually taking place from the practices, is it gives a different perspective. In terms of the connection and the longevity of coaches, the lifespan of coaches within certain academies throughout the world, in actual fact, dependent upon the coaches' outcomes, whether they want to just stay in the development part of the game where performance is important, or you want to go as a result-based coach where winning is important. It definitely changes. So I think there's as we develop and evolve as an individual, they can change in time. So I don't think there's any specific answer to the question other than, an individual's objective and outcomes. Do you want to establish to be either a performance or a result coach? And that changes. But, ultimately it's around, as the book alludes to, it's about that connection. And certain coaches resonate more to the younger side, the younger players, where others might want to go into the adult game. That result base is massively important. So it changes. I don't think, in my own opinion, there is an answer to it, but I can give you my thoughts and opinions around seeing so many coaches in my tenure. Being a coach developer on the FA and equally working within the academies, because it changes. As long as the academy and the outcomes of the academy are true to themselves, and the coach that is brought in follows those values and beliefs, then there's a lifespan. You can put your slippers. There's no point in putting slippers on pipes because they're very challenging environments, as you probably already aware.
the book flows with stories, and there's a lot of theory, but it's backed up with stories, and I think that's a good piece of reflection. Whenever you're saying, oh well, I never really looked at this here aspect of it in depth, and the first one that I experienced in the book was the insight to John, who was the quiet, introverted player, and how the breakthrough over a long period of time came. And I started to reflect on, do we start to, subconsciously overvalue this loud communication aspect of a player because we think of that as, the leader on the pitch, the defensive structure that we need communication for? And is that to the detriment of working a little bit harder to understand individuals who maybe don't show these behaviours to us through the loud vocals, or maybe they're not as comfortable in that form of communication? I mean, what do you think about this, coaching quiet and introverted players?
Yeah, I think who are the players? The first thing, who are the players being loud for, Gary? So there will be players that come out and they're loud. They want to challenge things. They want to speak, and that's totally fine too, because it's what works for them. So when we look at coaches that are forcing the issue, are they making players be loud because that's what the coach wants, or is it because it's what works? And you've got to be aware of what is it that's making the player comfortable. I'm actually working with a player now that I've just spent the weekend with, and it's quite funny. He reminds me of John. He has that similar personality. He's quite quiet. He's a really nice kid. He doesn't say much, and he doesn't need to say much for me. It's not for me to intrude in his world and force him to be louder when the world that he's living in works for him and he's happy. And I think you're in when you're in school and you're growing up, and a teacher forces you to get up to the front of the class and they make you speak, And a lot of people have, I think it's well known, a lot of people have a fear of public speaking. Well, they get up at the front of the class and it actually makes it worse. And the teacher, I don't think the teacher would do that on purpose because they want to make you feel uncomfortable. They may not be aware of that's what they're doing. So I just think there's different ways and there's better ways, and if somebody's quiet and they're happy in what they do, you can bring them on board in different ways. They don't have to speak, they don't have to be loud if they're not comfortable with it, and you can work with them and make them comfortable in the world that they live in.
Yeah, I think it all depends on, as a coach individually, what you bring to the party as well. You only need to look at your own state of mind and how that can change things. We need to be more sensitive to the needs of the people in front of us, so the athletes, and be tuned in to what's actually occurring in front of us as opposed to what we think. So we mind read on many occasions, Gary, where we, just because a player's either overly boisterous or is too quiet, we're only picking up a very, very minute window of information of what is actually occurring, but it's our perception of it, and it can be misconstrued. It can certainly lead us down a rabbit hole whereby we start piecing the dots together, and the information we're trying to piece together is either about a player that's overly boisterous or insufficiently communicating. So therefore we start to put these pictures together, which then generate feelings around, an opinion about a player or a group of players. So, again, the book brings to life true life experiences from field experts or people who've got an element of expertise in their specific field. And so, as David's already alluded to, we just need to be tuned in a little bit more. And there's John Maxwell, the author and speaker, American author, pastor. He has a quote where he says, people may hear your words, but they feel your attitude. And that makes a lot of sense to me. But unless we actually listen and pay deep attention to what's going on, so we're visually observing things and a bit quieter in our own head, then, information, we're a little bit calmer. Now, I know the game's frenetic and emotional, all of those, we bring that to the party as well, but it's important we do pay more attention in terms of communication, because it's a vast and big word, isn't it, where we have different interpretations of what is meant by that, but culturally we could have massive differences. You mentioned John, a Nigerian kid who doesn't look you in the eye. Well, if we just check out what the Nigerian culture is like, some of it, they don't. So from my perspective, if a player doesn't look you in the eye, it's being disrespectful. Well, it's the opposite. They are showing respect. So it's being tuned into that, because it impacts them and it impacts the relationship, which we need to be very careful about.
The parallels between how we deal with people individually from a interpersonal communication, and then how we are trying to, or what we produce on the pitch, and I find really, really interesting. So the example of the guitar teacher and how you have people that play the guitar 100 different ways, but then in soccer, especially youth clubs, we want to produce this blanket standard of a technical player who can do X, Y, and Z. And is this why we struggle to produce creative players? Is because as a coach we want to lead the way in almost manufacture a certain template of what we believe? What's your thoughts on that?
I believe so, Gary, and I think if we look at the countries that have produced, I guess, world-class players. So you look at your Brazil and Spain, those countries, a lot of for me, soccer, it's a playground sport growing up, where a lot of these kids may not have been coached, they may have had a little bit of coaching, but it's a lot of playtime and a lot of enjoyment within that. And soccer, it is a complex game, but it's a game that requires different types of players. So chances are, if you play chess with pawns against someone that's got a full set, you're not gonna come out on top. So the sport requires it does require, you know, that general player, I guess, the one that a lot of people look to develop, that's steady and they do the job well, but it also requires mavericks. And there are people that we've spoken to that are featured in the book. One of them who's a rugby coach, he's been one of the most successful rugby coaches that's ever come over to the UK, and he's an incredible guy and an incredible coach, and he worked with mavericks. He had a player that came in that was in regards to what was seen as the norm, he was just off the wall in terms of what he could do on a game day. But he had to allow and let that player do that to an extent within the structure of what they're doing. And if we as coaches, I think if we pigeonhole players early on, and even as they're going into the development, and we berate them for mistakes and we don't allow them to experiment and explore, and also taking away the decisions by, I think, talking too much and telling them what we want, then we could actually take the magician out of them, because there's some players that they may be wired differently. They may be wired to a point where they're curious, they want to try things out, and I think that should be encouraged, especially when the kids are younger. They need to go and explore, they need to be curious to learn, they need to be curious to experiment and try things. And I think as coaches, I'd say the vast majority of us may have been guilty at some point where we may be coaching a game and we tell a player to do something and he doesn't do it at that exact moment, and then a couple of seconds later he does something magical, and all of a sudden what he's done has actually been better than what we thought was going to take place. Mm-hmm. And you think, I think we have to be just very mindful around how we manage those magical players that can unlock doors in a game that is very structured, and in a game that does require pieces of magic to make things happen. And you want it to be fun, you want them to enjoy it, and I think that's how we can do that.
I think when we were aiming to create master locksmiths, people, young players, male and female, who are able to see things that a complicated player that works in a very complex way, but it's simple for them. When we discard that, it's taken away that genius from within. I think a lot of it is coach affected, primarily down to the practice designs and the ability of the coach to be able to see things as they are and be able to create opportunities. So, as a simple, I have my best mate on the planet is a little West Island Terrier who's sat beside me at the moment. He's 15 years of age, and if I put him in the desert driving a tank, he would there's nothing he can hit. There's nothing he needs to do other than just drive the tank, press the button, press forward, and away he'll go. The big challenge, though, for him is if I put him in a city or a town where he's got to make decisions, where there's traffic lights, there's roundabouts, there's other vehicles, there's contraflow, where they've got to make these big decisions that are crucial. Otherwise, if he doesn't make the right decision at the right times, then we're going to have conflict. We're going to have a car crash. So, in short, the practice designs and giving players the opportunity to make decisions without, David mentioned it, without too much intervention, where the ball's rolling a lot, but your information that you're providing to the player is bespoke. It's for him or her, and it helps take them down the path of being creative, but being enthusiastic to go with the party or be with the party or you're working with them because they're on the same journey, albeit either younger or older, depending on you as a coach. But the practices that can help either unlock this genius, and so that we can create these master locksmiths that work in a simple way, but because we want it so linear, it prevents them the opportunity to see the accurate pictures on the landscape of the pitch, and playing in areas of the pitch or on the pitch where that's where they play. Where I've seen goalkeepers or I've seen centre backs playing centre forward or midfield during practice, which do have a place. But the older players, as they get older and they go higher up the game, then it's important that they're seeing the same accurate pictures as they would during the game. And if we restrict that, then we're squeezing the lifeblood out of the game. And I think currently there are very exciting players within the game. But your question, Gary, is a very interesting one. And I'm going to ask you a question. How would you answer that?
I would say, yeah. I mean, for sure. I mean, I feel very strongly that coaches, because, like you said there, how we picture the game is how we now manufacture the game. I think 10 years ago, 4-moment model was somewhat revolutionary in terms of our organisation and for our tactical setup of our teams. But now, by, like you said, how we practice, how we view session design, how we plan our session, where we put emphasis on our session, I think there's a large majority of what we do today that actually restricts thinking of players and restricts the player to do something off the cuff. And now when I reverse engineer my experience in football, my best experiences was whenever those limitations didn't exist, either as a coach or a player. So I'm fascinated by, because in England, I think it's moving back, and again, outside looking in, I think it's moving back towards the creative players are getting a little bit more leeway, ownership, whatever it is. But in the US, I don't see that happening, and that's just my opinion.
That's interesting. I think because we're the modern coach, the term that's used, but I think we're becoming more educated on not so much how players learn, although we speak a lot about it. Not sure people tend to understand exactly what is meant by that, because we go down to this learner, to that learner, he's a visual, he's an auditory, he's a kinesthetic. The understanding of all of that is just a term. We're actually, when we use multi-sensory information that can allow the player, so we're getting to know them about what works best for them. And I think we tend, and have been very good at finding out what they're not good at, as opposed to encouraging them what they are good at. And instead of working across this very linear and very restrictive way of, I think he or she should be this type of player and they're not doing X. Well, what are they good? What is their A game? What is the very, very, if they're a technician, when I refer to technician, when they're very good at going past players, well, and you want them to go on the left and they're good on the left, well, great. Just, we need to encourage that. They'll find ways. They'll always unlock doors to find different ways if we stick them in the environment and stick them in, practice designs are realistic and relevant to the game.
The difference now with the UK and I'm going to say the English players are very much going towards that creative, curious player where you want them to explore, you want them to do things, and I think you look now the higher level English players that are coming into the national team, you're seeing a lot of that. You're seeing players that are brave, and you're seeing players that want to hurt you when they're playing. It's not about just passing to pass, which is okay, but we've got a lot of players now that want to go and explore, and I look at, in the US, I don't see it as much. I think there's a bit of a cultural thing in there. But for me, when I'm working with players, I really try and encourage them to explore. I really encourage them to be brave in 1v1 situations, and to go and do and try things that they maybe not have been able to or allowed to do previously. Because only by doing it and exploring will they then know that they may be actually good at it. And if you encourage them to just pass and we'll keep it, but when you've got a player in a 1v1 situation higher up the field, for me, with the younger kids especially, is go and have a go. Go on, off you go. Come on, can you go past him? And be brave and see what you've got. Show me some magic.
We'll take a quick break here to talk about Bounce Athletics Dynamo Goals, the world's most portable and durable small-sided goals. Only takes 5 seconds to set up or fold flat and utilised by the entire North American soccer spectrum, from rec programs to MLS clubs, to create small-sided dynamic training and game environments. Available in 3x5 and 4x6 size, Dynamo Goal requires no staking, so it's perfect on all training surfaces. Net customization is also available for those programs looking to create a professional training environment. The goals start at only $257 per goal. With free shipping, and Modern Soccer Coach listeners get a $50 discount on their order when they use the offer code MODERN, not case sensitive, at checkout. Visit www.dynamogoal for complete details. Back to David and Keith.
It's interesting because the coach will control the environment and how much of these environments are restricting players, and that's what we're trying to talk about right now. And as you move in the book, you talk about Vince Lombardi, only by knowing yourself can you be a better leader. But do you think it's difficult that our starting point from a traditional coach development platform is the first thing you need to do as a coach is take your badges? But like you said there, Keith, in our badges, what are we taught to do? Go in, find fault, stop, correct, and then modify it towards what you want to see. So, what is the step today for better, I suppose, better self-awareness or better understanding that as a coach, the more you know, the less you know, and sometimes the better you do in terms of your setup, the more restrictive you can do, more damage than good almost.
I think, Gary, the first thing with that is truly knowing what you value and truly knowing what you believe and what it is you're here to bring to the party as a coach. So I truly believe that I'm in a privileged position to provide a positive learning environment for the players that I work with, but also the coaches that I mentor, because I want both the players and the coaches to have a great learning experience. So for me, looking at that, knowing what I believe and knowing the things that I value and the things that I stand for and the principles that I have, from that point, knowing what I want to achieve, it's then up to me to go out and find out ways to do it, find out ways that I can do it better, learn by doing, because I think that's a huge thing, because I've gone out and I've had sessions where I've gone, it didn't work, and I've learned by doing it. And I think also on top of that is learning from others around you who are also doing it. And for me, I've been in such a fortunate position growing up, from when I can really remember, where I've been watching some of the best coaches in England in academies, and I've learned a lot from observation, but then I have to go out and do it. But when you know what you value and when you know what you believe and you know what you stand for, that's where you can then start implementing and looking at ways in which you can achieve what it is you want to get.
As coaches, and you mentioned coach education, what they do on courses, they give you the framework. That's really all that's required. They give you the basics, it's a framework, and then beyond that you branch out and we then adapt we adopt what's been taught, shown, explained. We experienced it, and then we need to adapt things. So, coach education frameworks, we adopt, we adapt, but we then have to form our own character, and that's shaped by what you truly believe in. And I come back to, are you a performance or are you a result-based coach? But as older coaches, if you're unaware of this process, I think it's important to first be aware that you need to be aware. There's something else going in front of you, because the more and older I get, the more and more I find out about things, the more I find out I don't. It takes you down different pathways, but it's been true and authentic to thyself, and really with the intention to want to provide something for greater good for those in front of, as opposed to, the players will give you something back, but it's a feeling sport, as you know. You've been involved with it yourself. There's lots of emotions generated from, pig's bladder, the ball itself. But ultimately, that what we want to get from it, it comes from what you see to be right. And as I say, that performance or result base can either drive you because you want to get something from the players, or you want to give something to the players. What can I add value to? Because players, they want three things from us. They just want to know that you care for them. They want to know that you can help them. And no matter what age they are, players, if they're 6 or 26, if you don't have value and they suss that out, you're going to lose them. They will shut down on you. They'll move away. They'll become more distant. And the last thing, which takes time, is, can they trust you? And that element itself comes through how you present yourself, how you conduct yourself, how you communicate to them, how you show empathy to them during the highs and the lows. And it's actually being consistent. So older coaches, or coaches across all spectrums, those three things: do you care? Can I learn? Can I trust you? And then having that air of, what can I give them as a coach, rather what can I take from them? And that's a good starting point from my experiences in being around the game and coaching now for 37 years. It's only over the last 10 years I've started to understand a little bit more, and there's so much more to learn. And that's what keeps me going.
You talk in the book about pace before you lead. I really enjoyed this aspect where it's about building the relationship before you probably need the relationship, which, looking back again, it's an area that I struggled in, and especially as a college coach, where players come in pre-season, 10 days, boom, get them up and running. Probably in day 2, you've confronted a player about something, you've tried to coach them, and you wonder why that player has a bad attitude about it. And I was like, 100 of these examples where I actually haven't built the relationship before I've worked with them. I wanted to get your thoughts on that, David, in the college environment. What would your experiences be on how to pace before you lead, or what advice would you give to players or coaches? Sorry.
So for the coaches, because I'm not going to go into too much detail around examples, but for those that are listening that maybe aren't sure, so pacing before leading is entering another person's world on their terms to demonstrate that you have an understanding of where they're coming from. So it then allows you to lead and influence people because you've got a better understanding of where it is they're coming from. And the college game is so different. It's so different to any other league, I guess we could say, in the world in regards to the preparation time and the time that you have with the players from the moment they arrive on campus for pre-season. But I think the big thing for me is, and asking that question, it's an interesting one because it takes me back to when I actually got recruited. the moment you make that first phone call, or you send that first email to connect with a player when you're recruiting them, you have an opportunity and the ability to build a connection with them. And when they're making those phone calls, just looking at it, and are they doing enough to find out about the player, but also to enter the world on their terms a little bit, and finding out similarities with them. What are the similarities? Finding out things that you agree on, and taking it from there. And obviously, if you've got the player on board, when they come on campus, you've got that short window to work with them. And I know you touched on it, Gary. It's difficult when they come in, and maybe on the second day you've had to get after a player for not doing something that maybe they should have done, or you have to intervene and coach. And it's difficult when you've not built a solid relationship from the start. And I think that is a big challenge in college. But as long as you can do it from the start, from those first phone calls, and I think you have to make, as a coach in college, a bigger effort to build a relationship, and to make them feel comfortable, and to let them know that you care for them. And I actually worked with college coach Bob Riasso, who he was at Rutgers for 30 odd years, and then went into a D2 school later down the line and won a national championship. And he cared for the players to the point where they knew that at any point, if they stepped out of line, he would get it. And there's a time and a place for it. And if players step out of line and they need to know, then it needs to happen. But he had such a good relationship with them that he could roast a player, and 10 minutes later he'd have their arm around the shoulder, telling them that he cares for them and what he's actually doing, he's doing to help them. And he was incredible. The way that he managed the players, for me, I learned so much from him, watching that and the way that he operated.
Praising players, discussed in the book, encourages, challenges us to be a bit more specific about the praise. How does a coach do this without turning, a well done or good job into a coaching lecture? How do you get that balance right?
I think what we've got to do, we've got to holistically praise where necessary and find the time to do that. Now, it becomes white noise after a period of time, Gary, where we're just praising just for the sake of it. And in the performance environment or the result-based environment, you're working with professional athletes, effort really shouldn't be praised. It's something that should be a give me. You're then praising or helping them along their pathway, their journey, where you're looking for things, the little minutiae, which is very specific for them. So if I look at the younger ones, the younger players, and I go into the effort, and it could be, I've just seen a player away from the ball, just make a slat, and we're in possession. He makes a run to receive it, but he doesn't get it. I'm just recognising the run and acknowledging that either through a thumbs up or a verbal comment, which actually indicates there's something else taking place and it's specific for them. And the way you go about doing that is, for example, Gary, I saw what you did. That was excellent. Well done. I saw it. Now you might know you might not know even what it was, but at least there's been some form of acknowledgement. If it comes round to to beating a player in a 1v1 where you're dominating, your intention is to go past the player, and the 1v1 domination, and because it's a term that we use, and we've been working on going to your left hand side, and you give it a go, and it doesn't work. It's not worked yet. Then afterwards, it's a matter of them praising that. Now, right after that, or during the process of this confrontation with an opponent, they're not listening. So we can be encouraging them or asking them, go on, get at them, which is general content, general information. But how many players actually truly listen to that and actually acknowledge it? It's finding the timely moment where it's having that great intense sense of timing where the ball goes out of play. Then you can actually, Gary, listen, I saw it, well done, give it another go, son. I love what you're doing. And through the energy of your voice and the tonality and the volume of that, or a thumbs up, then it becomes very specific rather than very generic. So, and the game, as you know, it's bespoke. It's an individual playing against himself or herself. It's to become your best you. If you try to be anything else, and they do at times, they compare themselves against someone else, then it's pulling them back to very specific detail around what is best for that individual based upon the coach's current knowledge base. And for me, that has been the greatest learning in that's taken place 15 years for me, where, you know, I wanted to become the best coach on the planet. In actual fact, you know, there was no intention to do anybody any harm. But it's only now where I'm getting to understand where the very specific information, which is diluted, and it goes very narrow focused onto the individual's need, rather than the generic. Where, as I say, if you go to performance or you go to result, then I'm not. If you're a result coach, I'm not interested in the effort. And praising the effort as a general might go for a period of time, but overall it gets lost. Watch what they do, and then shut your own head down a little bit, because I think we talk a great deal, too much at times, and actually not watching what's going on.
Love the insight from Ryan May on the concept of returning to home base in the relationship. And again, it was one of many things in the book that I shook my head and was like, it's not a very complex concept, but I've been guilty of, why did I not work this out? But you know, what's your take? Why do we struggle in that there? Why do we think that once we start the relationship, something happens in it, and then we suddenly divert, but we never really check in? We always wait for the players to come to us. I'm sure I'm not the only one who struggled with it. Why do you think we do?
I think we take for granted, Gary, too many times. It's like, you know, I'll come home, I've got my tea on the table, my wife's cooked the tea, and I just take for granted she cooked the tea because she cooked the tea yesterday and the day before and the day before and the week before, and we just take for granted. And when we do that, we're not actually reconnecting. It's actually bringing true value to what's being given from someone else. So when when Ryan alluded to returning to home base in the relationship, that's what we're referring to. So, you know, I'll be going to the club very shortly. I've got to be on my way in 15 minutes time, but what I'll be doing is we have the security. I'll go through the gates. There'll be a female who will be opening. We'll have the roller shutter doors. She'll be opening the doors, and I can either walk in and not acknowledge that, or I can put true value to what she's doing, and that's what it's referring to. Is when we turn up and there's games taking place or players coming. You know, they're giving you a high five, or they're shaking hands, or they're fist bumping, or doing all those types of things nowadays. Do we really it's getting back to, do we take that? Is that taken for granted? It's revisiting the things that work again, and if they work again. We just got to know that. And if they're not, we then need to readjust, reevaluate, and then move off, or we've got to test certain things and see whether that functions. And then if it does, we then need to revisit and then go back to home base after a period of time. In general, it's a matter of revisiting and reflection and then reevaluating. We've got to change, and we've got to change very, very quickly. So that's really what Ryan, that I quite like it myself. That insight from Ryan, who's a super young man. When he mentioned that returning to home base in relationships, that's really what he's alluding to.
I think as well, Gary, I know my dad touched on it earlier, is one of the things players and athletes want from you is they want to know if you care for them. You can spend all the time building up this great relationship and finding out about a player, but if you then never go back towards what worked in the first place, then to the player it shows, does the coach really care for me? Because he hasn't really looked at how I'm doing or how my family is. And I think, when you build that relationship and you're asking questions, the key is to listen to the answer and to pay deep attention to it and to keep hold of it. And we touched in the book a little bit on, if I ask you, do you have a dog? And I know with my dad.
It's up in my head straight away then.
Yeah, if you ask him, if you know that my dad's got a dog and you delve into that, and then 6 months down the line when you talk to him again, you ask him how the dog's doing, that then it shows a great deal, and I know how that would make my dad feel. And I look at that of how it would make him feel. Well, when we're dealing with players, how will it make them feel when we ask them about something or we revisit things that they care about? Because they want to know that we care for them. So if we show that we care about what it is they care about, it goes a great way for us.
You're talking about there, David, that coach understanding more about the player and showing them you care. But support groups are also very important for us as coaches, and coach-to-coach relationships. Looks like you've been very, very fortunate to have that with your father. And Keith, I know you talk about, and there's a 10% of the profits going to the foundation that Dick Bate. Everyone in the US knows Dick Bate, and he was the convention shining light for so many years. Can you talk about the impact that he had on your journey?
Yeah, I met Dick 35 years ago, Gary, and we haven't got enough time on this call to talk about him. I never, after knowing him for so many years, I never knew him. I never heard him talk about man or woman and speak about them in a derogatory way. His values and how he treated people was exemplary, and he's such an humble man. But when the lights came on, when he was presenting, and either practically or theoretically, there was some magic. It was just a washing. His verbal vitamins just hit you, and it hit you deeply. And I was intrigued by how he did that. I was very fortunate, whereby he asked me to. I said, how do you mentor Dick Bate? But he actually rang me up, and I'll never forget it. But he rang me up on one Friday night. And he said nobody actually critiques. He was with the England setup back then, and he asked me to work with him, with a few videos, and I never slept that weekend. It was an experience that I'll never forget. And so he directed courses. He was a UEFA tutor. He was a FIFA instructor. He directed many, many courses across the world. And his influence, Gary, was beyond anything I can articulate to you. And, whenever I speak about him, I speak very fondly about Dick, and I miss him immensely. I just felt, what we needed to do is, there's something, and it was something that David and I spoke about, and it was a great idea. I think it's a fantastic idea. Hey, we dedicate Dick because of, there's got to be a legacy, and that was important. And secondly, how can we actually support a fund or a trust that actually helped him in his latter days of life? And I think anybody who's listening to or watching this podcast, that we'll each have somebody who's created this footballing memory. And Dick I have many fond memories of Dick, and so for us to provide funds, 10% of the profit we just mentioned from the book is going to the trust which looked after him. But anyone here now listening, find yourself a mentor, get a mentor, and who might be more experienced or more qualified than yourself, and that's what Dick was for me, and that's what he did to me. And you know, having so much quality time with him was it was special. And David mentioned about Mavericks. Well, that's exactly what Dick he was, and he continues to have that. We just want to keep that legacy moving along.
Okay, last one. For me, the book is about, you know, adapting, evolving. Fantastic message. What's the biggest piece of advice that you both would have to coaches young and old?
There's two for me. I think the first one is you never know where your next learning will come from. So it doesn't mean that it's necessarily within soccer. It could be, you could be at Starbucks and you meet somebody that teaches you a lesson that you weren't expecting and you weren't ready for. And I have mentors that are in the sport that have helped me immensely, and I can't express how fortunate I've been to grow with my dad and be around him and have his guidance and his leadership and the help that he's shown me and the things that he's done for me. I wouldn't be where I am right now. But I've also been fortunate to meet people that I didn't expect. I have a friend that's in his 70s that I never, at the time of meeting him, it's a long story so I couldn't go into it, but I met him in the middle of Preston and he's from North Carolina. And he's someone I class as a friend, but he's someone that I class as a mentor too. And I've learned lessons from him that are in life, but I've taken them into sports and into coaching. So for me, the being open, because you never know where your next learning is going to come from, and then having a mentor or having mentors, and it doesn't always have to be within the sport. It could be people outside of it that may have big experiences and learnings that you can take that will help you become better than you already are at what you're doing.
I call that, Gary, the hidden school. There's opportunities everywhere. We just got to be mindful of it and be ready for it. But I have a checklist. You know, I think that your questions, by the way, have been excellent. But the biggest piece of advice to coaches, and it's a checklist, and it's really finding out. You know, you've got to learn from what doesn't work. That's the important thing. What's not working, and if you continue to do that, continue to do the same thing. So what doesn't work, you've then got to pay attention and pay attention to observing what's actually occurring in front of you to give you that more accurate picture. The second thing beyond that is then you need to reflect on that information and reflect deeply. You know, so you plan, you then do, you then reflect, you do it, then you review. And then we need to educate, and we've got to find areas where, you know, you believe you've got a shortfall, but by Corinne, you've got to fill that void then with energy, and an energy that it drives you, gets you out of bed first thing in the morning. The fourth thing, Gary, we need to keep up with current trends, and the game changes, evolves, and you know, at the sharp end, what we've got to do is reverse engineering, go from what's working at what is currently happening within our league, within the Premier League. What are they doing? And athletes are, you know, they're getting quicker, faster, stronger. But the practice design, so current trends, we then need to strip it back and reverse engineer and keep things simple, keep it relative, and keep it realistic to the game. I've seen lots of fancy practices, but have no bearing on the game. You know, if you're going to practice and have no goals, what's the point in playing when you have goals? You're not practicing for what you're gonna face. David's already mentioned it is to have mentors. I've got mentors in or out the game, but find suitable mentors. Somebody's going to be honest. Somebody who will tell you exactly right, tell you exactly what it's about. They're either experienced within the game or they've either got more qualifications than, but there's someone that you can trust. And then you need to be brave, be courageous, and you know, believe in what you feel is right. And then the last thing is just be yourself, be authentic, Be brave and be authentic, because if you're being anything other than that, who are you being? And so all of that accumulation of, and I know there's quite a few, that's the biggest set of advice, a checklist that I can give anyone, and it's, for me, those are formulas for success. That if you follow those strategies and those processes of the process and then the strategies, then the game's evolving, the game's changing, and then what we're doing ultimately is we're helping the end user, which is the player, and if we've not got them, in the upper part of the mind, then what are we doing it for? And I know they give us something back, but we've got to go in there with the right intention to want to help somewhere, because it's such a powerful medium, the game nowadays, where particularly in the Premier League, they play a year in the Premier League, or play less than a year. They're multi-millionaires, so there's expectation. So what gifts can we give each player, or a set of players? It's the 21st of January today, and it's Christmas Day for me. For when I go in, the players, I wanted to give them a present. That's the intention. So, give them the enthusiasm and the energy, but that's the greatest advice I can actually give. And I know I've waffled on a little bit, but no, it's important.
Brilliant. Well, here, I got to let you go. Keith, you shooting off the training now, so I'm so glad we got this in, and absolutely great way to finish it. But I'm going to encourage everyone to go and get the book, and it's given me a lot to think about, so thanks for putting it out there, and I look forward to the next one.
Right, so the book, Gold Dust, How to Become a More Effective Coach Quickly. Gary, it's been absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate your time and your professionalism and the way that you've conducted yourself. And the questions have been really, really, really good for us to think more deeply.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I second that as well, Gary. The questions they've been fantastic.
Thanks so much to David and Keith for their time and their insight there. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Yeah, similar to the book there, that conversation, there's so many layers to communication, and when we talk about it online, similar to how we talk about culture, we always say how important it is and how you can't coach without it and how critical it is to development, etc., but we don't really go into how we can develop better ways to communicate. And then from experience and working with players, when you go down a road of looking at communication a little more in depth, you realize that it's way more complex, and there are so many variables that can change at different levels, at different ages, with different players and in different environments. But I think we do need to be looking closer at how we're presenting information, how we're building these relationships, and how we're actually challenging players. And that's what I really enjoyed from Keith there, was it's not just enough to get by on, hello, someone likes you and you like them and it's great, there's a great relationship. That's not enough in an environment where you're trying to challenge a player, trying to improve a player, trying to improve a team. And then when you're taking that task on, you need to constantly look at the future of your relationship and where it's going to go next. And there's so many different layers to it. So what I enjoyed about the book was the way it was set out. It makes you think in every chapter, but it also gives you perspectives of such and such tried this, or this worked at such and such a level. And that's what was a great reflection exercise for me, because little things like building a relationship before you try and coach somebody, and how you might be challenged whenever that relationship isn't strong enough. That was so easy for me to, when I reflected, to see how I had made mistakes in that area. But then it's not so easy at the time, because again, you might be looking at 30 or 40 other things. So yeah, absolutely brilliant. Really, really enjoyed that conversation from David and Keith there, and we'd urge you to go and get the book and take a read of it, and hopefully it makes as much of an impact to you as it did to me. So please let me know what you think at Gary Curneen on Instagram, at Gary Curneen on Twitter. Appreciate your support. I will speak to you next week. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. For more coaching topics, sessions, and resources, head on over to Coach Curneen on Facebook or visit the website at www.modernsoccercoach.com.